The night started like any other. I clocked in just before midnight, slouched into the squeaky old chair inside the security booth, and flicked on the monitors. Outside, the warehouse yard stretched into stillness, rows of delivery trucks standing idle beneath flickering security lights. It was quiet, almost too quiet, with only the hum of electricity and the faint buzz of the fluorescent overheads for company. I rubbed my eyes and leaned forward, letting the monitors cycle through the feeds. Most showed the same mundane angles: loading bays, empty corridors, locked storage rooms. I toggled on the infrared yard lights, bathing everything in cold grayscale. That's when I saw it. On camera 4, a pale figure in a brown coat moved behind one of the parked trucks. It was brief, just a step, then gone. I frowned and zoomed in, trying to sharpen the image, but the second I did, the camera glitched. Horizontal lines of static shot across the screen, and then nothing. The yard was empty again. No sign of the figure. I stared for a long moment, lips pressed tight. I picked up the intercom and pressed the button. "All quiet out there," I said, mostly out of routine. Only static replied. A faint thump echoed behind me. I spun around, but the booth was empty. Just the concrete wall and the soft hum of the heater. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, laughed once under my breath, and sat back down. Minutes passed. The silence thickened. Then camera 9 lit up. A figure stood at the far end of a hallway. I leaned closer, squinting at the grainy image. It was a woman, standing still, facing away. I recognized the uniform, one of the new recruits. Her name was Alina. She'd started last week. The hallway light behind her blinked. Then she walked forward, right into the shadows, and disappeared. I waited for her to appear on the next camera feed. Nothing. The monitors cycled again. Empty halls, motionless trucks, the occasional flicker. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 12:21. Something felt off. I pressed the intercom again. "Alina, copy?" No answer. Just then, the monitor for camera 6 glitched, a static burst. And when it cleared, the same hallway where the woman had vanished was visible again. This time, empty. I tapped the side of the monitor. Static. Then black. Suddenly, a low crackle rose from the radio. Not the intercom. The clock radio sitting beside the coffee machine. It had never worked properly, but now it hissed with sound, like a distant station trying to come through. Then, through the static, a melody. A child's voice began singing a nursery rhyme. Slow, drawn out, off-key. Something about stars and falling. I reached for the volume knob with trembling fingers, trying to shut it off, but the radio wouldn't respond. The voice wavered, distorted, then dropped into a whisper. "Jordan," my name, whispered in the voice of a child. Every hair on my arm stood straight. I froze, hand hovering above the dial. I turned around again, slowly this time. Nothing. Still the booth. Still the walls. But something had changed. The air felt heavier, and the monitors were cycling faster now, as if trying to catch up to something I hadn't yet seen. I swallowed hard and leaned forward, eyes locked on the screens. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last moment the booth would feel familiar. I pressed the intercom again, leaning into the mic. "Alina, come in. Do you copy?" Static. Nothing else. I tapped the console twice. The hum of the monitors filled the booth. The woman I saw earlier on camera 9, she hadn't shown up on any other feed since. One second she was walking down the corridor, the next, gone. I switched through the camera feeds manually, looking for her. Nothing but quiet hallways and the dead air of the loading dock. Then a low humming began. It wasn't coming from the console. It was behind the wall. A vibration, deep and rhythmic, like an engine idling right beneath the floor. I pressed my palm to the wall. The metal was cold, but it throbbed slightly, as if something massive was turning slowly in the dark. I tried the radio again, flipping over to the day shift frequency. "Malik, This is Jordan. You up? A long pause, then crackling. Jordan? Malik's voice came through, but it was strange, warped, as if underwater or played backward and then corrected. You okay down there? His words echoed, not just once but twice, like a recording looping back. I swallowed. Something's going on with the feed. Did anyone else report anything weird tonight? But his voice faded, and I never got a response. The humming grew louder. Then, without warning, the old clock radio on the side shelf buzzed to life. I hadn't touched it in months. The tuner was broken, and it usually just sat there collecting dust. But now it hissed like a speaker shorting out, and then, through the static, came something I hadn't heard in years. A lullaby. A child's voice sang slowly, deliberately, as if remembering the words in real time. It was the kind of song you'd expect from a music box. Soft, delicate, almost fragile. I recognized it. My sister used to hum that tune when I was a kid. It didn't belong here. I moved toward the radio, hands trembling. The song dragged on for several seconds, each note bending slightly, distorting. And then, it stopped. Silence. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, it whispered, "Jordan." Every inch of my skin broke out in goosebumps. I staggered back, knocking over my coffee cup. The mug shattered against the tile, its echo unnaturally loud in the booth. I turned toward the sound, heart racing, but saw only myself reflected in the darkened monitors. And for a moment, the reflection didn't match me. It blinked just a second too late. I backed up to the wall, staring at the screens. I didn't understand what I was seeing. The booth was secure, nothing was open, and yet something was in here with me. Something I couldn't see but could feel, pressing in around me like the air had thickened. I tried the intercom again. Static. Camera 2 blinked on. The corridor where Alina had vanished flickered back into view. But this time, the image was reversed, mirrored, with the shadows crawling toward the lens. I switched to camera 5. Nothing. Back to camera 2. Static again. The booth's light flickered. The humming grew deeper, almost mechanical now. And then, from somewhere beyond the wall, a single knock. Deliberate. Measured. Close. I reached for my flashlight, but the beam flickered uselessly, barely reaching the edge of the desk. I stood in the booth, surrounded by cameras, screens, switches, and yet utterly powerless. The systems had turned against me, and somewhere in the humming silence, I thought I heard something else. Breathing. Not mine. Right behind the wall, and it knew my name. The lights began to flicker, not just overhead, but on every monitor. The humming in the walls grew louder, deeper, like the grinding of unseen gears. I stood still, breathing shallow, trying to convince myself this was some kind of power surge, a system malfunction, anything I could explain. Then I heard the first crash. Somewhere out in the corridor, a heavy metal shutter slammed shut. A second followed, then a third. Bang, 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 like steel jaws locking into place, sealing the building one hallway at a time. I grabbed the intercom. "Malik, anyone, come in. There's something wrong with the lockdown system." Only static answered. The security protocol wasn't something that could just trigger on its own. It required dual clearance, a physical override. And yet, I watched through the monitors as one by one, every shutter in the building crashed down, sealing off the hallways, the yard, the warehouse bays. The screen feeds dimmed, their colors draining to grayscale. Then, with a soft click, the booth door behind me locked. I ran to it immediately, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. A red light glowed above the frame, locked, sealed. I was trapped. A siren began to wail, not loud, not the usual piercing blare, but low, broken, like it had been slowed down or warped through some filter. I turned back to the monitors. Most had gone black, or were flickering between frames. Only one remained fully active. Camera 1, which faced the booth from the outside. And I saw myself, slumped in the chair, eyes closed, completely still. I wasn't sitting there. I was standing, watching, breathing. But on the feed, my body, myself, was unmoving, as if asleep. Or worse. I backed away from the screen slowly. My pulse thudded in my ears. And then, I felt it. A hand, resting gently on my shoulder. I spun around so fast I nearly fell. Standing inches away from me was myself. But not me. His skin was pale, almost translucent under the flickering lights. His eyes were sunken, ringed with shadows, and he wore my uniform perfectly, except it hung strangely, like the fabric didn't quite fit right around his limbs. He stared at me, lips parted, but unmoving. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask something, anything, but he beat me to it. He leaned close, and in a hollow voice that didn't echo, he whispered, "Welcome back." Then his face dissolved, not into blood, not into ash, into static. Like a dying television feed, his entire body scattered into shimmering interference and evaporated in the air. I stumbled back, gasping, arms shaking. The booth was empty again, but the lights continued flickering. The siren continued wailing. And on the monitor, the version of me in the chair was still sitting there, still unmoving, still watching. And I didn't know anymore which one of us was real. I didn't move. Not at first. The air in the booth had gone cold, not chilly, but sharp, as if every molecule around me had been pulled tight, frozen in place. The doppelganger was gone. No sound, no trace. But I still felt the echo of his voice in my ear. "Welcome back." I turned slowly to the monitors. The sirens had stopped without warning. The flickering lights overhead settled into a low, sickly glow. And every screen now displayed the same feed, a wide shot of the booth from the outside. And there I was, slumped in the chair, eyes shut, motionless, my breath caught in my throat. I staggered closer, hands gripping the edge of the desk. The version of me on the screen wasn't asleep. He wasn't resting. He was still, too still. I wasn't in the chair. I was here, standing, alive, breathing, trembling. But that image on the monitor, it had my face, my body, same uniform, same watch on the left wrist, the patch I'd sewn on crooked 2 weeks ago. There, everything, except for the eyes. Even closed, they looked wrong, sunken, hollow, like they'd been empty for a long, long time. I didn't understand. Was I having a breakdown? A seizure? Some kind of psychotic episode? I gripped the side of the console hard enough to feel my fingers ache. I scanned every screen, hoping for something, anything, that would break the loop. But the booth cameras remained fixed. Nothing changed, until one of the speakers, one I hadn't even noticed was still on, popped with soft static. Then a voice came through. A woman's voice. Quiet. Familiar. Almost kind. "Jordan." I froze. I hadn't heard that voice in over 2 years. Not since she disappeared. "Sarah?" I whispered. Silence. Then the static returned. Louder this time. The name still hung in the air, echoing through my bones. My hands trembled. I stepped back from the monitors, trying to breathe, trying to think. The booth felt tighter now, smaller, the walls inching closer with every passing second. Sarah had been a guard too, my partner on night duty at a different site. She vanished during a routine patrol. No signs of a struggle, no exit logs. The only thing they found was her flashlight, still on, lying in an empty corridor. And now, her voice was speaking to me from a place that shouldn't exist. I turned back to the chair, the one where he, the version of me, sat. I crept toward it slowly, every step heavier than the last. The closer I got, the more it felt like I was sinking into something thick and invisible. I reached out, hesitantly, to touch the chair, but my fingers passed right through it, like smoke or static. I gasped and yanked my hand back. My legs gave way, and I stumbled into the corner of the booth. I could feel my mind fraying, trying to reconcile two versions of myself in the same space. One alive, terrified, gasping for answers. The other, locked in silence, caught in a frozen frame. And then the monitors all blinked at once. Gone. Black. Then, flicker. The pale figure in the brown coat reappeared on a loop. Walking behind the truck, turning slightly toward the camera, face still unreadable. Another flicker. Sarah's last steps into the corridor, vanishing into darkness. Flicker. My reflection, just a second behind every movement I made, blinking after I did, breathing after I breathed. I wasn't watching the footage anymore. It was watching me, and whatever had taken Sarah, whatever was now inside the booth, had finally turned its eyes on me. I stood in the booth, breathing like I'd just run miles, sweat cold on the back of my neck. Sarah's name still echoed in my head, sharper than any siren. I hadn't heard it spoken aloud in years, not since the night she vanished mid-shift. 1 second she was checking the camera feeds. The next, she was gone. No one ever found her. No exit logs, no footage. Just the chair spinning and the scent of ozone in the air. And now her voice was speaking to me again, softly, through the same speakers that had once gone dead the night she disappeared. I staggered to the booth's reinforced window, clutching at some last thread of logic. I needed to get out. I slammed my palm against the glass, then grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the desk and hurled it full force. The glass didn't even scratch. I shouted, cursed, kicked the door. Nothing. The monitors flickered again, breaking their synchronized loop. Each screen began to replay the moment that woman, the new recruit, had walked into the corridor earlier. The same clip again and again, her figure in the hallway, turning left, disappearing, turning left, disappearing. A glitched loop. Each time the shadows seemed darker, deeper, and then, on monitor 6, something changed. The screen distorted. Lines of static dragged across it. Then symbols began to appear. Not letters, not numbers, not even anything religious or occult. Just pure digital anomalies. Jagged shapes flickering in a rhythm that made no sense, but felt wrong. I backed away, one hand on the console, the other still shaking from the failed escape attempt. Then the cameras shifted again. This time, all of them, every single feed, showed me. But not now. They were reflections. My face blinking a second too late, moving slightly off beat from my own actions. A mirrored delay that shouldn't exist. I waved my hand in front of the console. My reflection on the screens waved after I did. Late, lagging, watching me. I leaned in close to one monitor. My reflection leaned in too. Too close. Its eyes wide with something between fear and hunger. And then, it smiled. I stumbled back, tripping over the corner of the chair, landing hard on the floor. I lay there staring up at the ceiling tiles, heart pounding. And I remembered. Sarah's last week. She had started acting strange. Said she was seeing herself in places she wasn't. That the cameras were out of sync. That the building was watching her. We laughed about it. I laughed. And then she was gone. Just like that. I sat up, slow and careful, trying not to look directly at the monitors again. Instead, I let my eyes scan the booth. The lights above buzzed erratically. The power indicator on the main console was blinking red, a steady, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat. Then the clock radio clicked on again, and the lullaby returned. But this time, it wasn't just the child's voice. There was another, layered underneath. Whispering, murmuring something behind the melody. I leaned in, and heard it. She walked too far, Jordan. Just like you. My throat closed up. My legs moved on their own. I grabbed the emergency key, useless earlier, and shoved it into the base of the booth door anyway. Twisted, slammed. Nothing. The booth wouldn't let me out. The screens wouldn't stop watching. And somewhere deep in the repeating footage, I could still see her. The new recruit. Walking. Turning. Vanishing. Again and again. And I knew, without needing to check, that I was next in line. It was the silence that finally drove me to move. Not the static, not the sirens, not even the broken lullaby whispering my name. Just the pure, unnatural silence. The kind that made my ears ring, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. I crawled under the desk, fumbling around the tangle of wires and cold metal. My fingers brushed against the emergency maintenance panel, a backup hatch built decades ago for electrical checks. I'd never used it. No one had. The screws were rusted, and the panel shrieked as I pulled it open. I aimed my flashlight into the gap and felt a cold gust of air blow into my face. Behind the wall was a tunnel that shouldn't have existed. Narrow, metallic, barely wider than my shoulders, stretching into the dark. I didn't think. I just went. Crawling forward on hands and knees, I left the booth behind. Every inch forward made my spine itch, like the space was pressing inward, reshaping itself the deeper I went. Then, the tunnel opened, into a hallway. It was pristine. Too pristine. Like it had been built yesterday and left to rot by the end of the same day. The walls were lined with black panels, smooth and humming faintly. And overhead, long fluorescent lights blinked, but they weren't flickering randomly. They were blinking in sequence, like they were watching me pass. Every time I turned to look behind me, a light would go dark. Every time I faced forward again, a camera above would click, and then flicker to life behind me. I saw myself on a wall-mounted monitor, just a second ago, taking the exact step I had just taken. The feed vanished. Another screen activated. This one on the far wall, showing me again, now mid-breath, my mouth slightly open. I turned to catch the camera, but it always captured me just before, like the building was recording memories before I made them. I started walking faster. The air grew heavier, the lights dimmer, and then, at the far end of the hallway, a monitor lit up, showing her. The woman from earlier. Same uniform, same slow, deliberate walk. Only this time, she wasn't walking away. She was walking toward the camera, toward me. Her head tilted slightly, and even through the static, I could see it. That smile. Wide. Knowing. The feed crackled, and then went black. I froze. Something behind me moved. Not the sound of footsteps. Something quicker. Twitching. Flickering. I turned, and she was there, right behind me. Face blurred like a corrupted file. Her limbs distorted, shifting slightly in and out of place, like a glitch trying to resolve itself. Her smile never faded. Her eyes, what I could make of them, were dark smudges that somehow stared. I stumbled back, heart jackhammering, breath caught in my throat. The lights above flickered, then burst, one by one, showering sparks along the hallway. She didn't move, just stood there, watching. And then she raised one hand, not to wave, but to point, at me. Behind me, the wall opened with a loud hiss, a doorway appearing where none had been before. And I understood. I wasn't meant to leave. I was being guided, deeper, into the maze that had already taken Sarah, into the place behind the cameras, into the footage no one ever gets to see. I don't know how long I stood in that hallway, staring at the empty space where the woman had vanished. The lights above me buzzed, twitching with the dying voltage of a place that shouldn't exist. Every step forward now felt wrong, like I was walking deeper into someone else's memory, or maybe mine, twisted and played back through broken glass. I turned and ran, back through the narrow tunnel, back toward the booth. But when I climbed out from the panel and stood up, something was different. Dust clung to every surface, thick, undisturbed. The monitors were dark. The console was off. The booth was cold. Not cold like before. This was stillness. Stale, untouched air. It looked like no one had been in here for years. I spun around, heart racing, eyes darting to every corner. The chair was empty. No slumped body. No reflection. No sign that I had ever been here. I stepped toward the console, reaching out to the monitor. The dust crumbled under my fingers as I wiped the screen clean. It flickered to life, Only one feed appeared. Camera 1. But it didn't show the booth. It showed a new room, a different booth. And inside, a guard I didn't recognize was watching the monitors. He looked bored, young, tapping his pen against the desk. Then, I saw it. Behind him. Just for a second. A blur. The shape of a man. Just outside the frame. And I knew. It was me. Not my body. Not the version of me that used to sit in this very chair. But the thing I had become. Stuck between feeds. Between loops. A shadow in someone else's shift. I screamed. Or maybe I tried to. But there was no sound. Nothing came from my throat. I wasn't in the booth anymore. I wasn't in the hallway. I wasn't even on the screen. I was behind it, watching, forever watching. I reached for the controls, tried to flick a switch, touch a button, type a message. Nothing responded. I turned toward the glass, but there was no reflection, no face, no me. Only static, and in that hiss, one word repeated like a broken whisper. Safe now. When the sun finally rose, the morning patrol found nothing but an empty booth. The power was cut. The monitors were dark. My coffee mug, the one I'd used every night, lay shattered on the floor in a ring of dried dust. And on the final tape, paused at exactly midnight, there I was, frozen in the chair, eyes open wide, a second before I disappeared from the frame. The reflection in the screen stayed a little longer, just long enough to blink, late, and smile.